All right, we are back for another episode of the AltMed podcast. It gives me great pleasure to be welcoming to this episode our dear friend and one of our favorite cannabis consultants, Mr. Nick Morley. Welcome, Nick.
Hey guys, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you. It's always great to see your face and that big smile and that big burly beard and a little bit less hair on the top this time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of trimming going on.
It's good. With the beard or?
Yeah. No, we haven't quite hit trimming season, but yeah, the beard's trimmed.
Yeah.
Good. And where are you right now? You're up in the northern hinterlands, somewhere up there, or?
Let's be honest here. I'm in Byron Bay.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. Very nice. Yeah.
But you originally started in Melbourne, didn't you?
I did. I grew up in a place called Mount Eliza, next to Frankston. Yeah, I lived down there until I was about 15, and then I moved up into the city and spent most of my teens and early adulthood in Melbourne. Left Melbourne when I was about 21 and moved to Europe, and then moved to Sydney, and then went off all over the world.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I haven't lived in Melbourne since I was 21.
I was going to ask, do you miss the place at all, or you kind of done with Melbourne?
No, look, I would love to go back, but I'm too scared to. I mean, it's Victoria. My girlfriend went down there. She hadn't been there for a year. She went down there last week, and the day she arrived, she got put into a lockdown. So It scares the shit out of me, to be honest. When you get rid of Dangerous Dan, what are we calling him?
Yeah, some in the media call him Dictator Dan, but
Dictator Dan, yeah. So you get rid of him, and I'll come down and visit.
We'll see you then.
Okay.
More importantly, in recent times, people would know you, especially publicly, for the green lights, possibly movie, business. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and expertise?
I'll start on the background because I don't have that many expertise. But the background is I was actually worked in the fashion industry for nearly 30 years as a hairstylist and a makeup artist. And I travelled and lived overseas for a long time. I also had a clothing label for about 7 years and worked. Yeah, basically I had a fashion background. And I moved to Byron Bay in, what are we at now? I moved to Byron Bay 7 or 8 years ago. And that's when my career started with medicinal cannabis. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. And in terms, when you say career, what do you mean by that? Okay,
so I was very fortunate enough to meet a gentleman by the name of CBD Luke, who you guys know quite well. Anyway, Lukey and I got together, and at that time when we first met was when another friend of ours, whose name shall not be mentioned, was starting to bring in the first lots of CBD oil into Australia, or the first lots that we knew of, or anyone else that we knew of. And I started to work with those guys. I mean, basically, I started taking that CBD oil, and I got some pretty amazing results with it. And we all got together and said, look, we've got to come up with a plan on how to get this out there, and that's what we did. And back then there was a loophole where you could sell it online if it was for topical use only, and that loophole ended quite a while back. Anyway, so we set up a website which was cbdoilaustralia.org, and that website did really well for about a year until the TGA sent us some letters and shut us down. And we closed it down.
Yeah. I'm interested.
I retired after that.
Retired, yeah, the career. We've actually dragged you out of retirement for this podcast, but no, well, in that period leading up to
memoirs.
legalization, and it's of course my area of interest, that happened in 2016, but I know that so much of the efforts that went into getting cannabis legalized for medical purposes went on decades before that. As someone that was perhaps really there at that time, what were your observations about getting it from where it was back then to where it is now?
Oh, look, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think a whole lot's changed. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a whole lot of things that are now available that are all on the schedule that you can get via prescription, but I don't think that it really, I don't think it adds up, like for the amount of people that are after the product and the amount of people that are available, and the amount of people that are actually getting the product and the quality of the products that are available, it doesn't really match up. And that's why the black market still exists, which is a shame. And I kind of wish it didn't actually. But yeah, it's just sort of the way things have gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's still the majority of CBD consumption in Australia, and this is data that's come out of Sydney Uni, is still coming from the black market. And when I say majority, I mean more than 95%. So it's it clearly is still the major part of the market in Australia. And yeah, it's maybe we can flesh that out a little bit more. What do you think?
Where do you think all that CBD is coming from? Like, how is it happening, I suppose is the question.
Well, there's certainly ample evidence on the CBD, communities and threads on the internet that would suggest that a lot of it does come in from America, and it comes in under names like hemp oil. Lots of this will just avoid detection, and I know that there would be people manufacturing or companies manufacturing it legitimately here in Australia that perhaps up in arms, but clearly, if it's a pricing issue, accessing legally, there is clearly at this point in time still a really, really large demand for black market. Perhaps, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what are some of the drivers of that. Is it price? Is it the product mix that you can get on the black market that you might not otherwise be able to get legally with a prescription?
Okay, so interestingly enough, I had a meeting yesterday with a couple that were new patients, or we've been treating them for about 4 months, and they did a road trip from Melbourne, and they came up here and they sort of did the whole travel around the Northern Rivers, and they went to Nimbin, they went to Mullum, they went to Byron, and they sort of checked out and saw what products were available. And out of their bag, they pulled out all these bottles of all these different products. And not one of them was from overseas. They were all locally produced products. And I got to sort of smell them and sample them and see what they had. And it seems that there is a lot of farms now that are actually producing CBD oil. They're doing it under, I think there's a lot of people that have got hemp licenses that are actually have got their own extraction methods, and they seem to be skirting around the authorities. And I don't want to name names, but like there's certain farms that are out in the Northern Rivers that are producing actually a really, really quality product. I don't know what I do know what their extraction is. It's butane extraction. I don't know of any CO2 extraction up here, but there's definitely people that are growing like good organic CBD buds and extracting it and making a really, like, it seemed to me like a really good quality CBD oil. How much of it has been tested in laboratories, I don't know. I personally don't work with anything that hasn't been tested. So it would be interesting, and yeah, like you go to the hemp embassy, they carry quite a lot of different brands in there, or different types. I don't even know if you can call most of them brands. And it'd be interesting to know who they all are, but there's definitely no proof of any sort of lab testing on any of the bottles. But I must say that quite a lot of the product tasted and smelt pretty good.
Interesting.
And
and it's coming domestically too. I mean, I had always just presumed that a large amount of the black market was being serviced by imports, but yeah.
No, there's a lot of growers. There's a lot of growers that have cottoned onto it. You know, there's a lot of growers that are like, oh, you know, that I think, I don't know whether they feel like they won't get in as much trouble if they're caught with a hemp crop, or like I know black market growers that are actually growing hemp and extracting CBD to sell, as opposed to like growing weed and selling pounds.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I think if you assume that people are importing under the guise of hemp, then you must assume people are growing under the guise of hemp.
For
and
sure.
I knew that to be true, at least in New South Wales. I've heard that there's quite a few.
They're not hiding. Yeah, they're in plain sight.
Yeah.
Do we name names on this podcast, or?
Yeah, not really.
Bottles and show you, you know?
But it's more about just kind of general things that you might have seen, or obviously you've been around it for a long time, especially in the Australian scene. And we're wanting to kind of let people know the experience of others, because at the moment we're still waiting on a lot of clinical data to come through, and until then we need to most people are basing their information off anecdotes and what other people are reporting, and I can't think of anyone who's had more experience with that in the Australian landscape. So in terms of that, you've been around it for a long time. What kind of things do patients or people tell you that you know, these things have done for them?
Good question. Lately, we're seeing a huge influx of people needing help with mental health, so depression and anxiety. And CBD seems to be really, really good for that. Sleep and sleep issues, THC and CBD, awesome for that. We see a lot of issues related around either cancer or treatments and side effects caused by cancer treatments. And CBD and THC seem to be really good for that. Dementia and Alzheimer's, CBD seems to be really good for that. Topicals for arthritis and pain relief, back pains, nerve pain, people with shingles, CBD and THC topically seems to be good for that. I mean, look, it's just, the list goes on. It's actually quite phenomenal.
Amazing.
Just with, I mean, the mythically or otherwise, there's always been an association with that, Northern Rivers region of New South Wales having an affinity with cannabis. I mean, do you tend to find that people up in those parts generally have a really good kind of knowledge base about, CBD and other cannabinoids in the plant, or is it still, do you feel like education is just an ongoing part of medical cannabis?
Yeah, I think they do. Absolutely. I mean, look, I actually keep to myself these days. I don't spend a whole lot of time going out to Nimbin and going to seminars and all that stuff. I'm pretty busy running my practice, and I've got a team that works with me, and we kind of keep to ourselves now. But yeah, look, there is definitely, I know a bunch of black market growers that have a lot of knowledge around the plant and around cannabinoids. And, like I said, it's interesting because these guys are all growing really strong THC strains and now really interested in growing CBD strains. And there is a market for that. There's also a market for CBD buds as well. Like people are actually smoking CBD buds. Which, that's like a whole new frontier, I think.
And do you, in your experience, without going into any specifics, but the difference in quality between the black market and the white market from what you might have heard or might have seen other people?
Look, for sure there's sharks out there that are selling crap. Like some of the stuff that I've opened and smelled, I've just gone, that's fucking olive oil, or that's just hemp seed oil. It's got absolutely nothing in it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was really surprised with this couple that came around yesterday. This guy's got pancreatic cancer. He's actually quite a famous AFL footballer, and his wife. And it'd probably be good to get them on your podcast one day. I'll hook you guys up with them. But he's doing really well with his pancreatic cancer, and these guys are on a bit of a journey to learn about medicinal cannabis. And some of the products that they'd picked up were actually really, really good. Like there's one particular product that I'll talk to you about afterwards when we're not recording that was, it smells like Scott stuff. Like it is really good.
So
A grade.
Organic, biodynamic, and grown locally.
In the interest of in the interest of creating what we would call a balanced appraisal of cannabis,
Yeah.
In your experience, which there's much, have you seen any adverse or situations where people think it's going to help them, or they believe it might cure them, and it just doesn't eventuate that way, and it doesn't have the outcome that is desired?
Yeah. So I've definitely heard of that. We get a lot of people coming to us at Greenlight that have had not good experience with other black market products, and they've been totally let down. And then we've helped them, and the products that we've been able to introduce them to have been really good for them. But I think, is your question, does medicinal cannabis work for everyone?
Yeah, it's more that kind of question.
No, it doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, because I think
in fact, it's a tricky one, because I think if it's not dosed, if the blend's not right and the dose is not right, people can have some pretty bad experiences with it.
Yeah.
And they can also, I think people, like these days, everybody spends a lot of time Googling stuff and doing all this research, and they've convinced themselves that this product is going to save their life or cure them of any affliction that they're looking into. And it's not as easy as that, it's not like take some CBD oil and your problems are solved. I mean, change your diet, change the way you sleep, don't spend as much time on your phone and your computer, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of expectations around it, maybe too many, because it's been, sold as this, the saving grace of the planet, but it's not that, but it's definitely a powerful and, very important medicine that needs to be researched more. There needs to be more research.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember a scene from the film that you put out the other year, the Greenlight, where you were saying that people come and, you have some experiences with people who do see benefits from cannabis and really get a lot out of it. And then you have those cases where people are expecting to have some kind of miracle cure and it doesn't eventuate. And sometimes it ends in a really sad outcome for some of those scenarios. So
you get, there's look, to be honest with you, I haven't actually manned the phones for a couple of years, so I haven't been doing consults. I've just started doing them again. But when I was doing them, I was dealing with a lot of cancer patients, and I would say 7 out of 10 of those cancer patients are people that have been told that there is absolutely no hope for them. And you're sort of the end of the line, the last thing that can help them and save them. And it's a pretty nasty position to be in, as a consultant. And, there's a lot of pressure on us and the product to try and save them. And it doesn't. I mean, what it does do, though, is it gives them some dignity, probably brings their appetite back, takes away a lot of the pain without giving them opiates. It can definitely provide them with comfort, but it's not a sure thing for saving people from cancer. That's for sure. It's not a cure for cancer. It can fucking slow it right down. And in some stages, look, I mean, we've got cancer patients that we've been dealing with for 6 years that were told they had 3 months and they're still alive. But we've also seen hundreds of people die.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's not just a matter, you know, it's what are they eating? Anyway, go on, Andrew.
It's that very much a holistic approach. I mean, that's something that I don't know, you know, if we've necessarily spent too much time talking about this previously, Mitch, but that whole idea of medical cannabis being I guess, just not a front or a first line therapy. So for anyone who, I guess is seeking access to medical cannabis, you know, when you see your GP, you know, that's one of the criteria. They're going to ask you, have you failed? Yeah, in Australia, you know, have you failed on a conventional medicine first up? So, you know, that'll vary obviously depending on what indication you're presenting with, but it's I think you know, it's still treated very much as, you know, this is not your first one. You know, you can maybe try it on your second one, or otherwise it's relegated as your sort of your Hail Mary last line of therapy.
Yeah, and look, to be honest with you, I actually think that in a lot of cases, if you get an early diagnosis for cancer, I think that if you were to treat it purely with CBD and THC, you'd have a good chance of knocking it into remission straight away. In a lot of cases, the problem is with most therapies now that are, I mean, if we're talking about cancer, which we are, you know, you've got three options. You've got immunotherapy, you've got chemotherapy, and you've got radiation, and all of them are dangerous and not good for you, where cannabis is completely safe. So I think it should be a first-line therapy. Like, people should be given that option to try that for 3 months or 6 months before they start giving them everything else. To me, that makes perfect sense.
Do you think, though, that even just the idea of, you know, oncologists warming to that idea, and you know, oncology, like every discipline of medicine, is informed by the strength of clinical trial data and what they're used to. Do you think it would be difficult to even, you know, skirt with the idea of getting clinical trials in oncology? Because
they absolutely need them.
Yeah,
they totally need them. And yeah, and I'd be more than happy to share my all our information that we've got. I mean, we've collected a lot of data over the years of all the patients that we've worked with. I mean, you know, we could talk about retinoblastoma, which is like a form of tumors that grow on eyes. And we've had quite a lot of cases of that with really, really young children. And the oncologists are trying to treat it with chemotherapy, and the kids start dying. You know, like you're giving 2, 3, 4-year-old children high doses of chemotherapy, and they're literally fucking dying. Whereas we've had incredible results giving these kids THC and CBD, and they're perfectly healthy and they survive the cancer. Yeah. So there needs to be a trial done for that. I mean, you know, like we've done a lot of work with people with glioblastomas, you know, which is a really aggressive brain cancer. Look, CBD and THC doesn't cure it, but it fucking slows it right down. And, you know, normally people that get a glioblastoma, you know, if they have an operation and they get it removed, it normally grows back within 3 or 4 months. Then they have to get it done again and done again. But if you get them on these high doses of CBD and THC, you know, they might have to have an operation a year later or 2 years later. Instead of surviving that cancer by, you know, normally they say you've got a year to live, you might live for 3 or 4 years if you're using medicinal cannabis. You know, which is a good thing. But there is trials being done. Charlie Teo did trials with that. And there is more ongoing trials. I mean, I'm actually not that up to date with it at the moment. I've kind of just gone, fuck, I just can't be bothered reading about it all now. I just want to help the people we're working with.
Yeah, but these, you know, these particular patients who, you know, present with a serious like cancer, I mean, I can only presume that no one would necessarily be looking to medical cannabis unless they had, you know, maybe limited fortunes with more conventional therapies. I mean, I suppose my understanding of
you'd be surprised. No, you'd be surprised. They actually do.
Okay, because they
a
think
lot of a lot of people are scared of chemo and radiation. A lot of them.
There's a lot of trauma for the body to go through those experiences. So perhaps, it's seen by some as, well, let's try this, see how we go. And again, I know we say this every episode, but, Mitch and I, we don't endorse any particular medical opinion. We're not qualified in any way to give a medical opinion, but we definitely, I think it would be remiss to not have a discussion around some of the anecdotal evidence, which is in the process of, being put through clinical trials. So I think, to your point earlier, we're still, still a long way away from having a really, really clear understanding of how these, how medical cannabis interacts with various cancers. But it's
I'm just thinking about the disclaimer.
Evidence is intriguing. Was that a disclaimer, Mitch? Like a full?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the
Can you add
disclaimers.
me on that disclaimer as well, please?
Sorry?
Can you add me in on that disclaimer as well?
No, we're doing it for you. Because Nick is not a doctor.
Not at all.
You could say almost maybe a witch doctor would be more fitting.
No, I'm not a witch doctor. I'm a warlock.
Hey, one thing that we spend so much time talking about medical cannabis, but I'm just interested in the integrative, just holistic medicine. I know that's an area of interest for you, Nick. I mean, do you, with some of the, people that you've met along the journey who are, in looking for some sort of maybe plant-based intervention to help them with their health, what are some of the other medicines that form part of your interest?
My personal interest?
Yeah, or
not things that I would prescribe or offer to people, but things that have been personally interesting to me. Has been ayahuasca, absolutely. Psilocybin, lots of different types of mushrooms, 5-MeO DMT, which is toad medicine, cactus.
That 5-MeO that's literally a compound that just occurs naturally in toads. Is that right?
It is, yeah. It comes from a Sonoran desert toad. It's a venom that's extracted. It's a fear response in Sonoran desert toads, and it's they harvest it by like scaring the toads. They squirt it onto a glass pane. They dry it in the sun, and it looks like snot. They scrape it off, and then that is then put into a pipe and smoked. They also make it in a lab. There's also like a pharmaceutical version of the 5-MeO, but I think I haven't tried the. Hey,
sounds cheap. I was going to say the first method sounded GMP. I was just listening.
Like pharmaceutical grade,
straight out of the toad.
Not from the toad.
Straight from the toad's glands onto the glass GMP facility.
Amazing. Yeah, I don't think there's too much GMP ayahuasca out there available either. I know you see the way they make that stuff out in the pots,
Now, this is the one, by the way, that we haven't really had a bit of a deep dive into some of these topics. So I'm going to indulge you here because you are our oracle of wisdom on these areas.
Oh, hang on. I'm just going to cut you off there for 1 second. I will give you a brief outline on it, but if you really want to go deep, you need to chat with Luke.
Okay. CBD Luke.
He is the oracle.
Yeah.
We'll have to get CBD on for another session. Maybe we'll do a deep dive just into alternative medicines and some psychedelics and look at it in reference to like maybe the stuff they're doing overseas, like the MAPS kind of movement with psilocybin and for PTSD and MDMA, the kind of things they're doing over there. It could be interesting to get a little bit of. I know a lot of it's anecdotal at this point. But it is starting to emerge a little bit of more clinical testing. So it's a very interesting area.
It is very interesting, absolutely. And I know that Luke would be more than interested to chat with you guys about it. So I would reach out to him and get him on. I think he'd be a great podcast for you.
Yeah, I think we'll.
I'm happy to answer some questions though, Andrew. Shoot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in because there was, for anyone out there who thinks that, Mitch and I are a couple of crackpots running this, alternative medicine podcast. I mean, the topic of psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca, I was recently listening to an ABC podcast about it the other day on background briefing. It is slowly infiltrating mainstream discussion. I think one of the areas that I'm interested in is this idea that people actually go away and do retreats with ayahuasca. This is, kind of I don't know if you call it like a tourism angle or something, but have you ever done one of those? And what form do people take ayahuasca? What did you learn from taking it?
Okay, so I've never done a retreat, but I can tell you a funny story about my girlfriend, who I won't name, but she knows who she is. She actually went to Costa Rica with her father, and I'm not sure how old he is, but he's a very interesting guy and a big Melbourne businessman. Anyway, she's a great girl. She took her father off to Costa Rica, and they stayed at this 5-star retreat, which is called Rhythmia. Have you guys heard about that?
I haven't heard of Rhythmia.
Rhythmia is, I think Pete Evans did a documentary on it. Okay,
interesting.
Yeah, you should get Pete on. He'd be a good one for you guys to talk to. He hasn't got any other platforms anymore.
I was going to say, is it a TGH sanctioned facility or?
No, well, they're in Costa Rica. It's an American unit that's running out of Costa Rica, but I think it's the only 5-star, really sort of high-end run retreat. And I think it's a 7-day retreat. They did 7 days. And I think of those 7 days, you drink ayahuasca 5 nights in a row. And there's I think there's 100 people or even more, and a bunch of shamans and musicians, and they get together every night and they drink this medicine. And from what my girl told me, it was life-changing for both her and for her dad, and for a lot of other people that went.
I'm trying to think though of actually doing a retreat like that with my dad. He's a pretty, reserved guy. I wonder if the ayahuasca would bring him out of his shell a little bit. But that's quite an interesting kind of father-daughter bonding sesh.
It was incredible for them. In fact, if you ever wanted to do a podcast about it, I mean, she'd probably be willing to come and talk about it. But it was just, it was incredible. Like the story that she told me about, it's probably a bit too personal for me to delve into it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful story. But from all accounts, I know a few people who've been to Rhythmia, and it sounds like it's amazing. Personally, I don't like the idea of drinking medicine with 100 people. Yeah. I mean, it's a really intense and personal experience to go through. And when we do it up here, I do it with, with my friends. We've got a sort of tight men's group that we do it with. And there's never more than sort of 7 or 8 of us, and we all look out for each other. And it's a beautiful healing experience.
Yeah. And I think also speaking as someone who, has tried hallucinogenics, I would agree with you. I think the idea of, having people that you trust, your nearest and dearest with you when you embark upon those journeys is certainly important to me. I think having hundreds of strangers around wouldn't really quite the vibe I'd be going for. But
terrifying. You don't want to shit yourself in front of all those people.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what happens.
Yeah,
do people? I shit myself in therapy all the time.
It's just so intimidating.
Yeah,
despite I have to take CBD for it.
It cures everything.
But the spirit of what Mitch was doing before with, talking about the good and the bad with any medicine that we talk about on here. Just before we leave ayahuasca, one of the anecdotes that came out of this ABC podcast on background briefing that I was listening to was that for all of the revelations and the insights that people obtain from those experiences, there's also a lot of purging. So people are vomiting. There's lots of that happens. Is that something that kind of aligns with your experiences, or?
Yeah, absolutely. They call it getting well, not getting sick.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's all part of it. And I think it's the best part of it, because you come out of those ceremonies just feeling completely cleansed. I mean, there's different ways of purging. You can cry, you can vomit, you can shit. But yeah, it's what that medicine does is it sort of makes its way through your body, and it feels like it attaches itself to any old memories and old problems that you've been carrying around for your whole life. It basically connects to them and drags them out of your system, and whether you vomit them up or you go to the toilet and pass them out. But yeah, it's a full cleanse. And apparently I've never done 5 nights in a row. The most I've ever done is 2. And even that was pretty intense. But for my girlfriend, whose name shall not be mentioned.
Until we get to the podcast, that is.
Yeah. Like 5 nights in a row with her and her dad, it was life-changing stuff for them both.
Yeah, really. Very, very interesting.
I've heard mixed reviews. I have heard people say it's one of the most profound things they've ever done. And then I've heard some people say one of their friends came back and just wasn't the same. And, there was some kind of other stories that I think certain dispositions it seems to work better with than others, for example, is what I might.
Yeah. I've heard of people having. Well, I personally have had some really bad times on it. It's been some of the most difficult nights of my life, actually. But I think that was because I was probably meant to learn some pretty hard lessons. But look, I've heard of people not dealing well afterwards either. I mean, look, psychedelics are a slippery slope. They're not for everyone. I mean, you hear a lot about people taking LSD and never being the same as well. You got to remember that ayahuasca is a really, really powerful psychedelic. So is, psilocybin when it's taken. You take 5 grams of psilocybin, that's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, it's certainly it would seem to be because it really goes to the root cause. It reveals to you some of your inner demons, some of the memories that you've been carrying that are unpleasant. Whereas conventional psych medicine is really there, at least in my opinion, to mask symptoms. Be it an SSRI or something that regulates serotonin or dopamine levels. It's not necessarily going after the root cause. So do you think that's probably one of the reasons why it can be quite confronting?
Absolutely. It basically brings everything up. There is no hiding from things. And I mean, I think, I'm sure you guys have taken psychedelics, it can be very confronting.
Yeah. And I certainly, my experience was feeling a sense of one with, that's cliche, but people would identify with that who have had
one with me.
Yeah.
One with me, yeah.
One with Mitch, one with the whole family. Everyone was just all interconnected in a big way. But
it's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah, it is, and really appreciating, almost in a way, your insignificance and how you're such a small part of the overall bigger picture. But we will get Luke on to do a full deep dive into this, because I'm sure he will have many, many more insights as well to contribute.
Yeah, well, you won't have to say much because you won't get a word in.
Yeah,
but it's all good.
It's talk the legs off a donkey, and probably the back leg.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, he doesn't say anything that's not worth saying. Like, he thinks about everything before it comes out of his mouth. He's a very, very bright person.
Yeah, no, big fans of.
Definitely.
Well, we're talking about Luke, and I know we briefly talked about the movie before, but you did a bit of a media blitz after it. I remember you were on Triple J and did a few appearances. Do you feel as though people know you now around town? Are you getting a bit more of a profile? People are coming to you, or has nothing necessarily changed since the movie?
No, people know us for sure. It definitely changed some things. I cut all my hair and my beard off just to try and look a bit different. It didn't really help. Luke definitely gets recognised, and he doesn't like it at all. I had a really funny experience. I had my license suspended for losing points a while back, and while I'd lost my license, I got myself in a position where I had to hitchhike out of Byron Bay one afternoon back home, and I stood out there for like 2 minutes, and this guy pulled over, and he said, "Hey, you Nick?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, I just saw your movie last night. Jump in." And he drove me all the way home. He drove me like 7 kilometers out of his way.
Yeah.
So yeah, like people
one
do.
good Samaritan to another.
Yeah, he was a really nice dude. But we get a lot of, well, I do, because Luke's not on social media, but I get a lot of people contact me on Instagram, and I don't really look at Facebook, but I get a lot of messages on Messenger from people that have seen the film, that have reached out. But I think the way we set it up with my Greenlight website is that if people were looking for me, they just Google Greenlight Nicholas Morley, and then my website comes up and they can find us, and that's how we help people. So that was it was pretty clever in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think that there was nothing negative that came out of that film. It was all positive.
Did you? And I'm curious, just because the film does, deal directly with the topic of, the black market medical cannabis. Have you had any interactions or even words of support or criticism from anyone in law enforcement or anything like that?
Yeah, but nothing nothing that I would want to brag about. But yeah.
we can. Yeah,
we've had some interactions with certain families that are connected to the local police force in our area, and they love us. They don't have a problem with what we do. We've got a problem with cocaine up here. We've got a problem with ice.
Yeah.
That's what all the detectives are all focusing on. Medicinal cannabis is not really on the radar.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
TGI.
Sorry, we've got a bit of an interesting connection going on. We're losing you for a little bit, but what did you say just then?
I just said, like where we live, there's a lot of cocaine and a lot of ice being used, and I don't think that the local detectives are really that concerned about medicinal cannabis right now. They're all hunting down these coke dealers and ice dealers.
Yeah, and the TGA, you were saying something about that.
The TGA definitely, I don't openly sell medicinal cannabis. I don't have a website that sells it. We're just purely a consultancy. So, I've managed to stay out of their radar. But yeah, look, I think they're the TGA are the ones that are going around threatening black market websites. If you go online and Google CBD oil by Australia, there's a whole lot of sites that are selling oil. But if you watch them, they last for a couple of weeks and then they disappear, and then another one pops up and then they disappear. So I'm sure they're busy posting out letters of warnings to everyone.
Yeah, I believe a lot of them are set up by international companies that don't have those kind of legislations where it's a little bit more lenient, say, or a little bit more open, say, in North America or even in Europe for CBD. And it's not illegal to do it there. So they do it and they sell to Australia. But curiously, coming back to the cannabis, I kind of maybe rounding out this discussion. I always like to get, especially with people with as much experience as you, talking to hundreds, probably thousands actually of people along the journey. The most common questions that people ask, like what are the ABCs of, or the things that you hear the most from people in the community? Is it, how do I get it? Is it, how much does it cost? Will it work? Like what are the main things that the common man asks?
The first one is, can I drive on it?
Right.
without a doubt. The second one is, will it cure me? And the third one isn't a question, it's more of a statement saying, I don't want to get stoned.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of that's one of the main things, THC. So we do see a different safety kind of profile with CBD and THC. And I'm sure you would even admit that you've seen that in people seeking to use cannabis, where CBD might be much lower safety risk, but then some people don't necessarily respond well to THC, and some do, but definitely I know I've seen people not respond well to it in my time as well, and we're definitely seeing that in the clinical data as well. That most of the adverse reactions come from THC or products that have maybe more than, or they've had too much, or it's definitely, I can and it's also the thing that stops you from driving.
Yeah. I would say some people love THC and a lot of people hate it.
We talked about before the ratio and dosage being a really critical piece in someone's healthcare plan if they're taking medical cannabis products. But I'm just curious around the products, you know, like isolate on one end, and then your full spectrum oils on the other. Do you have any opinions generally on products and what you tend to, you know, be speaking to people about in terms of what they prefer? You've got your ear close to the ground.
Yeah, sure. We've had a lot, you know, like, I could pull out 3 or 4 cases and talk about them of people that have been taking our full spectrum. They've been taking full spectrum CBD oil, and then they've gone onto a prescribed product, which is an isolate. And in some cases, they need to take like 20 times the amount of isolate compared to the full spectrum. And that's an interesting one too. And I was kind of hoping we'd get there because, look, I think it's great now that that the TGA have announced that CBD is going to be Schedule 3. And it's great that chemists are going to be able to dispense it, but it's not going to be a full spectrum product. It's going to be an isolate. And do you agree?
Well, it could be a full spectrum, but it will still have to be at this point in time.
It'll be a broad spectrum, most likely, but still somewhat limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be really interesting seeing that all these companies that want to get their product out onto the market, they're going to have to do trials and they're going to have to prove that this product's got efficacy. My experience is, well, not my personal experience, but from what I've heard and what I've gathered, is that that isolates, unless they're mixed with full spectrum products, they're not that great. So if you were to buy a bottle of coconut oil with a bunch of isolate in it, it's not really going to do much to you. Or if you go and buy a can of soda that's CBD isolate, it's not going to do anything to you. In fact, we don't even know what it is going to do to you. It could actually be harmful to you for all we know. So there needs to be tests on that. I personally don't think that many products are actually going to get approved. I think it's just another way for the government to stall things.
Well, picking up on that point around will it predominate, I think that the predominant over-the-counter products will be what you're describing, the isolate in oil.
And they're 2 years away.
Yeah, and it's, you know, years away based on the time it will take for clinical trials to produce the data that will then need to be approved by the TGA. But I think there will still be scope for some really high CBD, like we're talking 98% plus CBD, full spectrum and broad spectrum products. But you know, that's obviously you know, a very different proposition to say a full spectrum oil that's maybe, you know, a 50-50 or something that's a different ratio. So
do you know of anyone that's got a broad spectrum product like that that's doing clinical trials?
I know 2 guys very well that have a really good broad spectrum product, but I can't say that that product is the subject of any clinical trials at this time.
Yeah. So maybe those guys just need to raise some money and start doing some trials.
This actually probably brings us to a really good point in terms of what we've been skirting around, but the future of the industry from your perspective as somebody who's seen kind of the rise of the legal medical system. And, it's been here now for 5 years. So it's really had a fair whack. It's obviously making some progress, but, how do you...
Really.
It's not really? And so what do you reckon the outlook is?
I think the only way that it's going to progress is if we get a change of government. I think we need people like Andrew running for office. We need to change things up because whoever's in charge at the moment is just not doing anything.
I thought that the craziest thing that we'd discussed on this podcast so far was some of the ayahuasca anecdotes, but having some say in Parliament, it sounds terrifying. But
oh, come on, Andrew, you just absolutely pull it in there.
No, I think
the equivalent of GMP toad.
Can you imagine, Andrew? He would be amazing. Andrew, have you followed up those leads I sent you?
I do, yeah. We have a mutual fondness for Fiona Patton, the upper house member in Victoria, who has just done so many wonderful things. I think in just performing lots of really bad drug laws that were previously in place. I know Victoria was a couple of decades behind New South Wales with safe injecting rooms, and she was instrumental with access to medical cannabis, the euthanasia, voluntary assisted dying legislation. So, we have some really good voices in Parliament, but I agree. I think we need more. And certainly while we have, socially conservative governments that are perhaps more interested in law enforcement approach to drugs, we're not really going to see the industry flourish. I think I always look at Australia as a case study as compared to the US, and I guess pitching all of the legal products in Australia to that higher GMP pharmaceutical grade means that the people that really get to participate in the industry have to be, really well-funded companies that are well-resourced. And then you look at America and there's scope for mum and dad growers to be involved in the industry and to sell their biomass up the chain. And I don't know, I'm not against at all the strictly, I'm not against the pharmaceutical approach at all. I just think that it would be nice if there was more opportunity for people at different levels to participate in the industry. And at the moment, it feels like there's this cluster of really well-resourced companies that are all sort of competing with each other. I've got the biggest facility, I've got the biggest farm, and I don't know. I think we could have more people involved at different levels.
Yeah, I agree. And it'd be great to see someone like you in there. I'm not sure about Mitchell, but definitely.
I'll sit there taking notes. I'll take minutes just for you.
Mitchy.
If there was a need to have a one of the best DJs in the country, getting everyone in the spirit of a question time or something, I could see Mitch having a little cameo DJ role in Parliament.
Music and cannabis is a combination that goes very well together. So whilst you're getting, I'll pump you up for your speeches to the lower house.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, when we get off when we finish this podcast, which should be very soon, I actually want to talk to you guys because I'm thinking about coming down next weekend.
Oh, amazing. Well, I guess that's probably our cue to finish up.
That is it's also our cue to say that if that happens, if you dare stray into what some describe as a dictatorship down here, personally, I think those people have got rocks in their head. But if you're down in Victoria, perhaps we might do a follow-up and have another sesh, but we're all in the same room if we're not under lock and key.
That'd be nice, but no cameras and let's just have a party.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds clinical.
Sounds very clinical.
Sounds good. Right. I love you guys.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Nick. I'm sure we'll do this again, and we'll stick around to have a chat.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.